Hi, I'm William with AttachWorx. Let me take you through start to finish how our attachments are made here in Bangalore, India. Behind me you can see where the raw steel and plate steel is received in and onto the first process. It's received into stock here. It goes through the first process of plasma or oxy cutting. This is a dual plasma and oxy gas cutting machine. It cuts the plate components, as you can see here. Two of these cutting tables run 24 hours a day in this factory. Here is where any cutting edges are prepared. This is where the bevel is cut onto the cutting edges. The track cutter you can see behind me is what's used to cut the bevels into the cutting edges for buckets, skid steer buckets and anything with a bevel cutting edge. Coming further down this bay you can see another plasma cutting table behind me. Material is loaded from this side of the bay and onto the table. This table also runs 24 hours a day in this factory. From there, components go to rolling and bending that you can see in this section of the factory. Material is cleaned up on these grinding stations. Before it's either bent in this press brake on the CNC rollers here. You can see each component is checked against a template at each stage of cutting and bending. You can see here a pallet of bent parts. They've been plasma cut in that section, cleaned in the grinding section there, pressed in the press brake in the corner, and now they're here ready to go to fitting and welding. From there, once a pallet has been assembled, they're moved along the factory to the fitting stations and then the welding stations. You can see here multiple products behind me, buckets, mainly buckets, being fabricated and then welded. Hopefully this gives you some scale or some size of scale of the size of this factory. There is 19 fitting stations, 19 welding stations, and you can just see how quick they get through product. There's two sides of a bucket that have been tacked together. You can see the holes have been machined in that wear edge to take some bolt on GET. Those two sides will then be tacked together to one of the backboards before being moved on to a finished welding station over here. In the case of our skid steer buckets, the same process would apply. For the production of our skid steer buckets, they would go through a fairly similar process. Plate steel would be cut, then rolled or bent. They would be assembled in this area over my right shoulder and then welded in this area over the left. For cast parts, they need preheated. They go through the oven, they go through preheating before welding. Here's some welding fixtures that are set up for the fabrication of some S-type quick couplers. Here, if you needed another size of the scale of this place, is the amount of welding wire that they buy in and go through. There is probably 20 pallets of 1.2mm flux core welding wire behind me, and it probably does not take long to go through that in this facility. We'll take a walk back up the other row of assembly and welding stations, and I'll show you there where the welded product gets cleaned up and test fitted before moving on to shot blasting and paint. So here is where products get tested for material thickness, for fitment, for weld presentation before they move on to shot blasting and paint. So here you can see a couple of our Skidsteer tree stump buckets, some of our AttachWorx Skidsteer tree stump buckets ready for testing before moving on to paint. Every single product here is tested for fitment before they are moved on any further in the process. That there is the Skidsteer bracket. I'll show you in a second one product being tested for fitment. Once completed products have been test fitted, they then come here to blasting, weld prep and paint. Here's another fitting and welding row behind me. The scale of this place is enormous. Here's one of our AttachWorx Skidsteer buckets, welded up. It's now to be ground out. All these marks will be ground off, they'll be cleaned up, and then it'll be sent for blasting and paint. You can see here products being cleaned off, grinded to remove any weld spatter, and ready for blasting and paint. You can see the attachments on hooks behind me. That is just so they can be hooked up. They stay on the one hook, they go right round this back corner of the facility where they are ground, shot blasted and painted. Let me quickly take you down this fitting and welding station that's doing some lighter duty attachments such as cutting edges and tooth holders, and some linkages for rakes and tilting buckets. You can see the continuation of this track system behind me. Buckets are clamped up like this one. They run through grinding, shot blasting and painting before they're left dry here. Then to be, if there's any assembly to take place, they'll be assembled. If not, they will be packaged, quality checked again and dispatched. You can see here, let me show you one that's completed. Some of our completed AttachWorx buckets. Behind me is one of our completed AttachWorx Skidsteer buckets. This is one with a bolt-on cutting edge. You can see how it's went from one end of the factory right through each process and to end up with a finished product like this. They'll then be packed up in crates similar to those behind me. They'll then be loaded into a container like this. And for the Skidsteer products, they'll be shipped to the US. And for the S-type buckets, you didn't see any of our ones getting made. I'll show you that in some future videos. But for them, they'll then be packed up and sent to ourselves in the UK. Hopefully that shows you the process of building some of our attachments from this end of the factory, where you can literally see the plate steel being received in, to that end of the factory where you can see the finished product painted, checked over, ready to be packed and dispatched and shipped to us. Hopefully that gives you a good rundown of the whole process. If you have any questions, as always folks, please get in the comments. Let us know what you're thinking. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to try and answer them in a future video. Any feedback whatsoever, please let us know. And you'll be doing us a massive favour also if you could press the subscribe button underneath as well. We're going to try and keep bringing you this content as much as possible. If you like it, you want to see more of this stuff, please let us know in the comments, and we'll catch up with you next time. Cheers!